Okay, welcome everyone to Chart's free webinar. This is actually a meeting format webinar. Today we have the ServSafe and the National Restaurant Association presenting on best practices and common pitfalls when cleaning and sanitizing your operation. Welcome Chip, Patrick, and Leslie.
Well, thank you, Tara, and thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. We always enjoy doing the webinars here for Chart, and as Tara alluded to, we're doing this one a little bit differently, putting it in a meeting format, because we found that when we've done these in the past, having some breakout sessions and some abilities to get some best practices talking, since we have so many folks on the phone, it is a win-win. But with that said, as we kind of dive into our focus here of best practices when cleaning and sanitizing your operation, I want to introduce and let them tell a little bit about themselves, my colleagues. So Patrick, would you begin, please?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. It's morning where I am. I'm joining you from my home office in Boise, Idaho. I'm Patrick Guzzle. I am the Vice President of Food Science for the National Restaurant Association. Prior to joining the National Restaurant Association, I worked primarily as a regulator for almost 20 years with the state of Idaho and also with a local health jurisdiction in Idaho. I'm a former chairman of the Conference for Food Protection. This Conference for Food Protection largely steers retail food safety policies throughout the United States. And the way they just ended up their virtual conference last week. I am also actively involved in organizations like the National Environmental Health Association and the Association of Food and Drug Officials. So thanks for having me today.
Appreciate it, Patrick. And Leslie?
Yes, hi. I'm so grateful to be here with all of you. I'm Leslie Huffman, and I work on the account management and sales side of the business for the National Restaurant Association, and work on projects primarily associated with ServSafe and ServSuccess. And I primarily work with national accounts that are based or headquartered out in the West, and I am located in California. I'll turn it back over to you, Chip.
Appreciate it. And my name is Chip Romp. I'm Senior Director of Training and Instructor Quality with the National Restaurant Association. Work very closely with our ServSafe instructors and with all of our teams. Been with the National Restaurant Association for about 6 years, but prior to that, spent 25 years in industry working for training and ops services departments in a wide variety of companies such as Fazoli's, Jillian's Entertainment, and Buffets Inc., for an example. So Chart is near and dear to my heart, and I know it's near and dear to a lot of people on this call's heart, as it's definitely helped support us as we personally grow from that point, but also provide us great insight that we can take back to our companies. And so we're really excited and glad that we can spend some time with you this afternoon. So our agenda today, we've got 5 points here. We're going to ask Patrick to kick us off here in a second to kind of go through and talk about the wonderful world of cleaning versus sanitizing versus disinfecting, and provide us some insight to those pieces and areas, again, as we looked at some of those best practices. Then you see here, number 2, we've got some breakout sessions. And right now it probably looks like we're going to have a couple breakout rooms that Tara's going to send us to, where we're going to ask you to take 10 minutes or so to kind of talk about some of those best practices that you may have or things that you see out there. So again, we can share and we can grow together. We'll come back as a group. You can provide feedback via the chat from that point, or you can take yourself off mute again, as Tara alluded to, and provide us some of that insight. Now, all of this is on the heels of us kicking off National Food Safety Month, which begins in September. And so after we kind of go through the breakout sessions and talk about that, we're going to talk about National Food Safety Month, and ServSafe and the National Restaurant Association has some tools and stuff that we want to provide you, and we'll go into more detail about them at that point in time. We're going to talk about the ServSafe dining commitment, things that we can do to help support the industry and help provide a comfortable feeling for our guests to come in and get in the doors and start dining with us. And then again, Q&A from that point. So that's our agenda here as we roll through it, as Patrick and Leslie and I kick it off here. So with that, Patrick, I'm going to move the slide over and turn it over to you to talk some cleaning versus sanitizing versus disinfecting.
All right, thanks, Chip. And if you don't mind, I hope you're going to drive those slides for me. I'll let you know when I need the next slide. So in my world, food safety, yeah, this is what keeps us up at night. I know it's not a very exciting topic, but when we talk about cleaning and sanitizing versus disinfecting, a lot of times, especially during the last year and a half, we use these terms interchangeably, and yet they aren't interchangeable terms. They each mean a different thing. So as I talk about this, I'd like you to think about cleaning, which just simply means clean to sight and touch. I'll show you some visual examples here a little bit later on of what I'm talking about. But when we talk cleaning, we're talking about removing visible material. Sanitizing removes or deactivates pathogens to safe levels. Now, if you're not familiar with the term pathogen, pathogen is a Greek-derived word. Pathos means disease. Genesis means beginning or causing. So a pathogen is a disease-causing organism. When we talk about sanitizing, we are targeting very specific disease-causing organisms, and we're going to reduce them to what we call a 5-log reduction. I'll talk about a log reduction in just a minute here. Disinfection is another step. Disinfection actually represents a 6-log reduction. We're talking about removing harmful bacteria, viruses, and other microorganisms to a 6-log level. Next slide, please. Chip, there we go. Thank you. So this is a visual description here. Now I use these next few slides courtesy of North Carolina State University. You can see underneath the picture, there's that little tagline about courtesy from NC State University. So this first one talks about cleaning. Now we have to clean before we apply a chemical sanitizer. It is impossible to sanitize a surface that is already dirty. So we have to remove the dirt from the surface before we can sanitize it. To remove dirt from a surface, we have to use soap and water and some kind of a physical action, scrubbing or wiping it down with soap and water, something like that, to actually remove large visible particles. That's cleaning. Next slide, please.
Hopefully my internet's quick enough for you there. It's moving.
Okay.
It's
There we
moving
go.
ahead for us, Patrick. You might be a little delayed, but the rest of us can see the slides.
Okay, gotcha. It is delayed for me, so I'll try to keep that in mind. So sanitizing destroys some bacteria and viruses. It brings them to a safe level. When we talk about pathogens, there has to be a certain number of the organism present before it will cause harm to human health. So we're going to reduce these bacteria and viruses to safe levels. That's what we talk about when we say a 5-log reduction. And again, I will speak about that in just a minute. So chemical sanitizing does rely on using a proper chemical concentration. I'll show you some examples later on of what I mean by proper chemical sanitization concentration. Now you can use heat. Generally, in order to use heat, we're talking about an amount of heat that is sufficient that it could cause a heat burn to your skin. So we do need to be very careful when we're talking about heat sanitizing. And then as you can see on the slide, most sanitizers are appropriate for use in food contact surfaces when they are used properly. There are several different sanitizers that might be available. Next slide, please. That one moved much more quickly. Thank you. Disinfecting is a little bit higher concentration of those chemical compounds. Disinfecting actually represents a 6-log reduction of these viruses and bacteria. And sometimes it gets a little bit more of those harder to destroy bacteria. Now, not all disinfectants are safe for food contact surfaces. So if you're disinfecting something, you need to be sure that you know what you're doing and what you're using. As you can see with the blue box at the bottom of this slide, we have discovered that the organism that causes COVID, the SARS-CoV-2 virus, does require very specific disinfectants to destroy and reduce that virus. And those disinfectants are found on EPA's website. They're called the List N disinfectants, and there's a website there at the bottom of this screen that you can go to review if you are purchasing a chemical to reduce the presence of SARS, you can make sure that it is part of that list and disinfectant. Next slide, please.
And Patrick, that link has been put in the chat. So if anybody wants to have reference to it, they can also find that link in the current chat.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that, Chip. So just to review, disinfecting removes dirt, sanitizing deactivates or destroys some bacteria and viruses, disinfecting destroys or inactivates more bacteria and viruses, bringing things to an even safer level. Next slide, please. Okay, so here's just an example that we're going to go through. Let's suppose you're working with ground beef. Now, in this particular case, I made these slides kind of specific for a restaurant, but the same principles apply. So imagine at home, even you're working with ground beef. When you're done with that ground beef, making burgers or whatever it is you're making, you might actually see some visible particles. You might see meat juices on your countertop or on a cutting board, something like that. So cleaning represents removing those visible particles that you can see. Pathogens are not visible to the naked eye. So you're not going to see the pathogens that may be present on a cutting board or on your counter or other food contact surface. So you're going to want to use a sanitizer then to reduce to safe levels those pathogens that are not visible. And then disinfecting again just removes things to an even greater level. Next slide, please. When I talked about a log reduction, this is referencing the logarithmic scale. Now, if you're familiar with the logarithmic scale, the explanation that I'm going to give you here is going to be oversimplified. If you're not familiar with a log scale, what I want you to think about is you're going to double a number every unit that you're measuring. So imagine a graph. You've got your x-axis across this way, right? And you've got your units of time or your number of organisms, whatever it is you're measuring across that x-axis. Then on your y-axis, you've got what you're trying to increase or decrease, right? So every unit that you go across on your x-axis, you're going to double that number on the y-axis. Again, that's a very simplified version of a logarithmic scale. And if you are familiar with a log scale, you know what I'm saying. You're sitting to yourself thinking, yeah, that's really simplified. And you're right, it is, okay? Cooking generally provides a 6 log reduction if we are cooking things to the proper temperature. So think about a population, let's suppose with that ground beef, for example, that example. Let's suppose that we start with 1 million E. coli organisms. Again, these are not visible to the naked eye. So 1 million organisms could be found in a very small space. Cooking will reduce those 1 million E. coli organisms to about 1. That's a 6 log reduction. Okay. Washing, just washing with soap and water at the best circumstances achieves about a 2 log reduction. So in other words, we'll take that same number of E. coli organisms and we'll reduce it. In this case, if we start with 1 million organisms of E. coli, washing will only reduce it down to 10,000. So you still have 10,000 organisms that you're concerned about. By the way, when we're talking about E. coli, it only really takes about 20 what we call colony forming units or 20 individual organisms to make someone sick. So washing alone takes it from 1 million to 10,000. You've still got to bring it down to safe levels. You're not quite there just washing alone. Next slide, please. Here's another visual representation of log reduction. You can see along the left of your slide here, it shows you the log reductions we're referencing. And then on the very far right, we're talking about a percentage of reduction. So a 5 log reduction represents a 99.999% reduction or kill of microorganisms. And then a 6 log reduction, you can see what that number is. Frequently, when you buy an over-the-counter disinfecting chemical, it frequently advertises 99.999% removal of germs. It's talking about a 5 log reduction when you see that advertised on a bottle of name brand sanitizers. Next slide, please. So here are some common mistakes that I have seen in the field with sanitizers. Now, each of these pictures that I'm going to show you, I have taken myself in different consultations that I have done. This first picture, what I want you to show you is if you're using a chemical sanitizer, you should have on hand some type of a test strip to make sure that sanitizer is at the proper concentration. You do need to use those test strips. Now, your suppliers will provide these for you. They're very inexpensive. You have to use them. I cannot stress that enough. They must be used. With this particular picture, I was asked to consult with a grocery store. I went into this grocery store and I discovered that I was the first person that had ever opened this particular packet of test strips. I know that for two reasons. Number one, when I found their test strips, which were kind of hidden behind a sink, people had kind of forgotten where they were. When I found the container of test strips, all of the original foil was still intact. The little plastic container that you see in this picture still had tape over it, so it had never been opened. When I opened the container, you can see what I discovered. The test strip had actually been decolored already. There was some discoloration taking place. With a test strip like this, you might still be able to use it. But for me, what the big red flag that was going off was that in this particular facility, nobody had ever bothered to check their sanitizer strength because this was their sanitizer test strips right there. Okay. Next slide, please. In a different facility, I was asked, can I simply just dip my utensils in the sanitizer bucket and leave them there? Now, again, this is designed for restaurants, this particular question. The answer to the question is no. Okay, remember that when we wash something, we have to also go through a practice that physically removes whatever organism it is we're trying to wash. And the same holds true for sanitizing. If you simply just put a sanitizer on something, it doesn't necessarily, it will help deactivate some things, but we need to go through a physical process of removing what it is we're trying to remove or reduce. So we need some kind of a physical action, wiping down a surface, again, scrubbing the surface, maybe if that's necessary. In this particular facility, you can see what they were doing. They were just simply setting the knife in the sanitizer bucket. Now, incidentally, they were using that knife to prep the raw chicken that you are also seeing there in that same picture. From a food safety perspective, there's several different violations going on in this picture, okay? First of all, once you sanitize something in a food preparation sense, you then need to allow it to air dry. That was not being air dried before it was being put into food again. The other thing I want you to notice about this particular sanitizer bucket, if you look closely, you can see the water is somewhat cloudy. It's beyond time to change that sanitizer solution. Okay, if you can see a cloudy sensation in the water, or if you can see any kind of visible particles or debris, it's time to change the sanitizer solution out. Okay, these chemicals aren't very expensive. They're not designed to have a bucket filled up in the morning and have that same bucket used for several hours. That's not how these chemicals are designed. They do need to be changed frequently throughout the day. When I do consulting, I recommend that folks change these sanitizer buckets out at least every couple of hours, but that does depend on how they're being used. And again, in this case, how do we tell if they're being used? I look at the water. I see the water's cloudy. I know that's being used pretty regularly. It's time, it's actually beyond time in this particular picture to change the water out. So a couple of more common mistakes going on here. Number one, just storing the knife or the utensil in the water is a concern, and then not changing the sanitizer solution frequently enough is another concern. Next slide, please. I want you to think back to the grocery store where I was doing some consulting and they had that package of test strips that had not been opened. This picture comes from that same location. Now, what's interesting to me in this case, keep in mind, they were not testing their own sanitizer strengths because I was the only person who had ever opened the sanitizer test strips. What they were doing is they were assuring me that all of their sanitizer buckets were filled at the same location using the exact same amount of sanitizer chemical. They had 3 different sanitizer buckets in use. Well, I went around and I checked each of the different sanitizer buckets, and you can see my results. These are not doctored results or anything. My results indicate that they were not using the exact same concentration levels in each of those buckets. In the case of the meat department, that sanitizer solution for this particular chemical was at the proper strength. In their food prep area, which was it was near their meat department, but it was a little bit different. They had no sanitizer residual in that bucket. In the deli department, they were using a different bucket that had some sanitizer, but it was not at a proper concentration. Now, I want you to look at the meat versus deli one here. In both cases, the sanitizer test strip did change a little bit green, but you'll notice that with the deli, there's kind of some color changes going on. You've got green, and then it kind of goes to almost a yellow, and it comes back to the orange. That is all indicative of an improper sanitizer strength. In this particular case, they were using a chemical simply known as quaternary ammonia sanitizer. And when you use a test strip for a quat or quaternary ammonia sanitizer, you want that test strip to change to a solid color of green, like what you're seeing with the meat department, and not have any color fluctuations in there. So those are just a few common mistakes that I have seen in the field with the use of different sanitizers. Next slide, please. All right, so that's a little bit about cleaning and sanitizing. I know we've got some breakout rooms scheduled, and I'm going to toss it back either to Chip or Tara to manage those breakout sessions.
Yeah, thank you, Patrick. I mean, I appreciate all that insight there from all the differences between cleaning, sanitizing, disinfecting, the understanding of the log from that point. It puts a different perspective on it from that point, from a day-to-day, as well as some of those examples that you gave from that point. So as you can see here, and as we talked about at the beginning, there's a lot of great insight and knowledge on that we have here. And so what we want to do is just take 10 minutes, and Tara's going to send you into a breakout room randomly with some folks. And I want you to think about these two questions here. I mean, Patrick explained some of the ones that he has seen in the past, both good and bad. And so what are some of the best practices for cleaning and sanitizing that you see in your facilities, that you see as a guest from that point? Consider, sanitizing best practices for your operation, for equipment, for non-food services, all those different pieces. And as well as, what are some of the common mistakes that you might see the employees make? Again, we can share that knowledge. Something that Chart is very, very good at is making sure that we, get our best practices and share from all. So Patrick, thank you for all that insight here. Tara, I'm going to ask if you will send everybody to their breakout rooms, and then we'll get back and you can provide us some insight from what you guys chatted about from that point. All right. Well, welcome back, everybody. It's amazing how quick 10 minutes I think can go from the breakout room. So I hope you guys had some good, fun conversation. 2 ways to communicate. If there are specific ones you want to note in the chat, feel free. But since we did do this in the meeting format and you have the ability to unmute, is there a room that would like to, I will open it up to kind of talk about your conversations with regards to those 2 questions of best practices and things that your employees may do?
Okay, so I'll be happy to go.
Thank you, Bill.
There's 2 of us in our meeting, Alma and I, and one of the things she noticed, things that aren't getting done is the table's not getting washed off before being sanitized with soap and water. That's a common thing. The other thing that I noted was common practices not being done. People using disinfectant on food equipment. A lot of disinfectants aren't approved for food grade equipment. So they have to sanitize those and not use a disinfectant. The other thing, and I want to talk about as far as best practices, and Patrick, I'm not sure if you know about this, but I was working with another group, and Ecolab was there, and I proposed a solution, and I've been proposing this for like about 20 years. I want a sanitizer bucket that changes colors when the dilution goes bad. Kind of like the whole Coors Light beer cans turn blue. Okay, I wanted a sanitizer. They came up with something. So what this bucket does, you put this strip into the bucket, and when you see the exclamation points, it tells you that it's gone below concentration. So you don't have to keep checking the buckets. So just to keep you up to speed on the latest technology going on at Ecolab. So
Very cool. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah.
yeah, but almost it would be great if we could do something like that with a spray bottle. So I'll take that back to them and see if they could do something with the spray bottle, because a lot of people don't change out their spray bottles as well with the sanitizer. They think, oh, it's good for a month just because it's in a bottle.
Sure. Great point. Great points. And while folks aren't on video, I am sure there are pencils writing right now those different pieces that you just mentioned, because what a great way to be able to have a tool that can definitely help you from a visual standpoint. So appreciate you bringing that up, as well as those really key pieces about not using a disinfectant to do equipment and some of those things that you're seeing. Any of the other rooms have something that they want to chime in? Again, appreciate it, Bill. Any other thoughts from anybody?
This is Michelle. We were just chatting about how, one, like modeling the behavior. So making sure that the management team is doing something as simple as when they walk in the back of the house, that they're washing their hands, really having your employees model that behavior and kind of that peer-to-peer pressure if they're not doing something right, kind of calling them out on that. Something as basic as having a checklist, a cleaning checklist. And then also, how do you find that resource? So can you put a QR code on a piece of equipment that can link back to the procedures of how to clean that equipment? So those are a couple of things we talked about.
Outstanding. Appreciate it. All right. Well, listen, again, I hope you guys got something out of that as you were chatting with your folks. I appreciate, again, Bill and Michelle chiming in and providing those. If you have additional ones, please feel free to put them in the chat as everybody can kind of use that as a gathering point as well. With that, I'm going to move forward here and ask Patrick to speak about, we've talked about a little bit National Food Safety Month and some of the pieces to that and opportunities we have for you.
Yeah, so National Food Safety Month is coming up in September. There's going to be different activities going on each week, and certainly would encourage members or non-members alike of the National Restaurant Association to check out the information at the website that you see on the screen in front of you, foodsafetyfocus.com. A lot of great activities. Again, it will be a little bit slightly different each week. So that's coming up throughout the month of September. And I think with that, I'm gonna
add one more thing, Patrick.
Please.
Again,
yeah.
From that point, a couple things. We have put in the chat a link. So with National Food Safety Month, every week, the ServSafe and the training certification team provide tools that can be utilized, posters, pre-shift meeting tools, et cetera, that can be utilized to help support all the different focus points for each week in the month. We have now provided everybody on this call in the chat with the link to acquire all of those materials right now, even before we go live with the Food Safety Month. So please feel free to go to the chat, pull that link out there and copy it. The focus this year of Food Safety Month is know safe and show safe. So again, it's understanding, what is needed to be safe, to make sure you're cleaning properly, sanitizing properly, disinfecting, but then to show it, because we all know that guests that are coming into our establishment right now, they're looking, boy, they've got extra set of eyes on, and they're looking for those to make sure so that they feel comfortable eating in each one of your establishments. So it's a great resource, as Patrick alluded to, foodsafetyfocus.com. Utilize it through the month of September and of course, all throughout the entire year, but please take advantage of that link that our good friend Dan Chancellor just posted in the chat, so that you can get those materials as well a little bit ahead of schedule. So we talk about, guests coming into your room, and I want to turn it over to Leslie here to kind of touch on the dining commitment, ServSafe dining commitment, and provide everybody here with some insight to that.
Yeah, thanks, Chip. Because really, when you think about it, when you do so much to protect your customers, there are opportunities to leverage that work and drive butts and seats. Because today, the pandemic has altered customers' awareness and sharpened their expectations about what safe dining entails. So the NRA has created a marketing program. It's called ServSafe Dining Commitment. It's consumer facing. It's free for restaurants. And the goal is that when diners see the ServSafe Dining Commitment seal that you can see here on this slide, they know that you have prioritized their health and safety. We're super proud of this program. It's turnkey for you. It's multifaceted. It's part of a multi-million-dollar marketing strategy designed to showcase restaurants who have demonstrated their ongoing commitment to food safety. So you can check that out at foodsafetyfocus.com as someone who dines out. And you can also use it as a free takeaway to bring back to your marketing department. If you need additional information about that, you can certainly reach out to me, and I would be more than happy to share information about that program with you as well. So now I'll turn it back over to you, Chip, for some closing thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, I want to note here, as you can see, Chart 100 is happening in Atlanta. It's September 18th through the 21st. So if you have the opportunity to go to chart.org, look and learn about the conference, the in-person conference that's gonna happen there. There's a lot of great keynotes. There's a lot of great breakout session. There's a lot of great interactive workshops and pieces like we're doing here today, so that you can continue to get great insight and information, not just on food safety training, but all sorts of training from that point. So hopefully you'll take advantage to learn more about it if you have not already signed up. But Patrick and Leslie and I appreciate everyone's time here. We're gonna take a quick look into the chat, see if there's any questions. If I don't know, Leslie and Patrick, if you've seen any as we've been going through, but we want to make sure we allot some time if there are any questions out there.
If there is a question that just came in about the ServSafe dining commitment, asking if it's for restaurants only.
Sorry, so the question is ServSafe dining commitment only for restaurants versus what, hotels?
Correct.
It's really designed for food and dining establishments. And correct me if I'm wrong, Dan, if there's another.
It's primarily for anyone who is providing food to consumers and to diners. So if your hotel has a breakfast bar, they can have the seal on it. If there's a university that has a food court in it, like, they can have this as well. So anyone that's providing food to diners is welcome to be a part of it.
Awesome. Well, on that note, we appreciate everybody's insight, time, participation. Again, from a webinar standpoint, this is a little bit different to have everyone go into breakout rooms, but hopefully you found it a positive experience. I know we have all appreciated the insight that you had. And Patrick, thank you for that insight with regards to cleaning, sanitizing, disinfectant. Leslie, thank you again for all that you've done here and kind of speaking to the dining commitment and all. Oh, I see Bill's got his hand up. Unmute. Tell us, Bill.
Chip, sorry, I got a question for the group while I have everyone here.
Yeah.
And it does deal with food safety. I think with the current situation with the restaurant industry, with the hiring, the first things that are neglected is cleanliness and sanitation. Is anyone doing anything innovative to engage their employees to making sure that this gets done? Because all of our restaurants are short-staffed, and you can just see that things are getting missed. Any new programs out there, any marketing or any approaches that anyone has? I'm always looking for some innovative ideas.
At Del Taco, we had created something called Safety for You. So it was one of our kind of like operations pillars. And then we created a e-learning course around that. So that ended up being part of the onboarding. So really talking about, keeping you and our guests safe at work, but also how do you keep yourself safe at home? So what can you do at your house as well to keep you and your family safe? So that was something that became part of the onboarding process.
We're doing something similar to that too, yes. Okay.
Anybody else? A great question. You're right. With the staffing, you want to make sure that the cleaning, sanitizing is not missed. Absolutely.
So in our breakout room, Bill, and I don't know if this really specifically answers your question or not, there were several folks in our breakout room that talked about the use of personalizing a story and making it really impactful for employees. And there have been a lot of information in the last 15 years or so about how, on average, a person working in a food establishment, frontline worker, usually does communicate more effectively through storytelling and verbal mechanisms, and not so effectively to look at a manual and have that paper sheet in front of them. So that might be something to consider with your employees, especially with the turnover that everybody is seeing right now, making it something that really is impactful for that employee as they think about cleaning, sanitizing, hand washing, all the other food safety components that are necessary.
All right. Appreciate it. All right. Well, again, thank you, everybody. Tara, I'll turn it over to you for any wrap up final notes that you have from Chart.
No, the only thing I really wanted to say is that this has been recorded. We will have it on the website later today. If you want to share the presentation part, we will not have the breakout part recorded, but the rest of it will be on. If you want to share it with anyone, you're welcome to. Thank you very much for being here.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you.